Okay, welcome back to Mr. Rocks. Today we're going to go ahead and add some code to an enemy, a movie clip that's on the stage. If I look at my stage, the movie clip is already on here, and it's a very simple movie clip. What I want to do is create code for this movie clip, and so we're going to create a class. The movie clip itself, if I look in the library, is called enemy, and if I want to see the code for this movie clip, I look down here on the bottom tab. There's a little circle with an I in it. If I click on that, I see that I come into symbol properties, and I've got my enemy name and my class name are the same. If I want to go in and edit this, I can just click on this pencil. I believe this works with CS5 and above, but if I click on here and go into Flash Professional, I've already got this guy started, and so just to save time, I wanted to go ahead and get moving on this. So let's go ahead on in here and take a look what we've got. I've already put in my constructor code. Actually, let's back up to the top. This is a package, and I've imported other files that I'm going to need for this. I've included flash.display.movieclip, flash.events.event, so I can use my event listeners, and I've also got geom, because my waypoints are going to be the point class, which is in the geometry class. So in any case, we'll go ahead and take class enemy is the name of my class, and notice that it extends movie clips so that all of the functionality of movie clips will be applied to my enemy, or can be applied, I should say. And also I've created a variable in here that can be seen throughout the entire class. So this is enemy speed, and as I move down, I'm going to go ahead and look at my constructor function. Two things in here. I've got my enemy speed. I set it to a value. So up here, I create the variable. Since it's not a class, it's a primitive type, I don't have to use the keyword new, but it just basically creates the name enemy speed, sets up the space in memory according to the type, and then down here, I'm going to put a value inside of my constructor function. I'm going to load a 3 for enemy speed. Now, everything in Flash is driven by event listeners, and this event listener is listening for every time I enter the frame. Every time I enter a frame, the Flash is going to throw an event called enter frame, and I'm going to go to this function that I've created called move enemy. So public function move enemy, it takes in a parameter. All my event listeners are going to send a parameter, so I have to receive that, and I'm not going to return anything, so I use the keyword void. Now, the first thing that I want to do inside this function is I want to go ahead and point the enemy towards the waypoint. Actually, my waypoints don't exist yet, so that's going to be slightly different, but that's okay. For some reason, this guy is not showing up. Well, that is very strange. Okay, anyway, we'll come back to that later. Maybe I'll go ahead and delete this guy for now. Okay, so the variable dx is going to be for horizontal movement, and I'm going to go ahead and set up a waypoint, and for right now I'll just go ahead and say 200 minus this dot x. So basically it's going to take the point 200 on the screen and subtract that from the current x location of my movie clip. Now I'm going to replace that 200 with something a little bit more interesting very soon. But if I come in here and do the same thing for my distance on the y-axis, I use dy. Let's go ahead and say 300. So I'm going to be moving from the point 200, 300. I'm going to go ahead and say this dot y. Now this refers to the class that I'm in, which is enemy, and so it's going to take whatever enemy calls this code. It's going to go ahead and look at the point 200, 300. It's going to take that location, and it's going to go ahead and subtract from that the x and the y location of that particular movie clip. Okay, that's good. Now, to move on, I want to go ahead and take this rotation. Okay, so my movie clip has a rotation. That's a property. And that rotation property, I'm going to go ahead and set that to I'm going to go ahead and say math dot, and I want to go ahead and set this according to the arctangent. And so for some reason the arctan function in Flash has some problems, and so they've created an arctan2 function. But basically this is going to take the arctangent. If I take the horizontal distance and the vertical distance and I load them into here, all I've got to do is take dy, and then I'm going to take dx, and that's going to give me the radian value of the angle, the tangent angle according to the opposite, and the horizontal values of that triangle. And so what I need to do is I need to convert this back into degree radians, because rotation is in degrees. This guy's going to return a radian value. So if you remember from geometry or pre-calc or wherever we teach that, all we have to do is come in here and we're going to go ahead and divide that by pi. And to do pi in ActionScript, you just call that out from the math class. And then we're going to go ahead and multiply that by 180 degrees. So math pi times 180, and that's going to give me a rotation value. And then all I have to do is actually move it. So I'm going to go ahead and say this dot x is equal to, and I'm going to go ahead and say this dot x, and I want to add to that the change. Now, the rotation is given to me by the dx and the dy, so I'm going to be pointing to my waypoint. And so I'm going to be taking this dot x and adding to it a horizontal value and a vertical value. So let's go ahead and do horizontal first. And the horizontal value we're going to find just by taking our cosine. So we say math dot cosine. And we're going to go ahead and in math dot cosine, I just have to take the cosine of the degree value of my movie clip, which is this dot rotation. Okay, so that's pretty simple. The problem is that now this dot rotation, it takes in a degree value, right? Actually, it wants a radian value, and I'm sending in degrees. So what I have to do is transform this guy into radians. So I'm constantly going back from radians to degrees, and in this case from degrees to radians. This dot rotation is degrees, so to change degrees to radians, what I need to do is divide by 180, kind of the inverse of what I just did up on top, and multiply that by math dot pi. Okay, and that should do it. Now the only other thing I need to do here is multiply this guy by the speed, and the larger the speed value, obviously, the faster my guy will go. So I've already created my variable up on top called enemy speed. I think we set that to 3, and so this guy should be done. So we go to speed, and now all I have to do to finish this up, I've moved my guy on the x-axis, that's the horizontal value. I want to do the same thing on the vertical value, so I'm going to say y, y, and change this guy to sine. And same thing, I'm putting in a degree value, so I'm going to convert that to radians, and then I'm going to go ahead and multiply it by the same speed, enemy speed, and now I'm ready to go. Okay, welcome back to creating our enemy class part 2. This is Mr. Rocks, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the code we just wrote. So in the last video, we created some code that was supposed to take this guy, this enemy, and move him towards the point on the stage 200, 300. And so if I go into my library, I can pull out different instances of this guy. He can be moved pointing in any direction. So let's go ahead and rotate this guy. Let's say here, and this guy will rotate him here. So what we did was we created code that was supposed to change the rotation or orientation of my enemy and then move him towards the point 200, 300 on the stage. I want to point out that every one of the instances of this particular class, each one is enemy, all have its own version of this code. So now if I save this guy and run him, all of the 3 movie clips are going to move towards that same point, and since I haven't given any instructions on what to do after that, they kind of freak out. But that's okay. Let's go ahead and continue on now and take a look at what we can do next. One of the other things that we want to do is we want to add a bunch of waypoints. And so we're not just heading towards one, we're going to go to several. So I'm going to create some waypoints. And to create some waypoints, I'm just going to go ahead and say variable, and I'm going to call this WP1, and this is going to be of type point, which is a class. Remember up here I imported my flash.geometry, and so that definition or that class is inside I'm not sure if geometry is actually a class name or a package name, but for our purpose, we'll just go ahead and say this is going to be equal to new, and we're going to go ahead and say point. Now, the reason I have to put new is that this is a class, not a primitive type. Int is primitive, so we just go ahead and make an instance here, but this is a class, and so to make an instance, I want to go ahead and put parentheses here. And one of the things that you can do with point is you can load values right as you create the instance. And so let's go ahead and create a couple of points along the stage. Let's go to the far right and say we'll go down 500, over 500, and we'll go down, maybe let's say 350. Okay, and now I'm going to do another point. So that's the first point my guys are going to go to. And just to make sure we're doing this right, we're going to do 2. I'll call this guy waypoint number 2. I'll go ahead and give him a different x value, a little bit closer to the left-hand side. So we'll say 100. And let's say we move him up closer to the top. So we'll say 150. Okay, so now I've got my 2 waypoints, but I have to have them inside. I don't have to, but I'm going to go ahead and put them inside of an array. And so to create an array, I'm going to say variable, I'm going to go ahead and say waypoints. And waypoints is going to be of type array. And I'm going to go ahead and stop that there. Down in the constructor function, that's where I'm actually going to instantiate this. So to create the array in here, I'm going to go ahead and say waypoints, which is the name of my array. Already created it, but I'm going to go ahead and do what's called an instantiation, which is probably a word the nice people at Oracle, when they created Java, made up. In any case, waypoints new array equals new array, and go ahead and put parenthesis. Now I've got my array created, but there's nothing inside of it. And so to create or to load this guy, I'm going to go ahead and do a third step here, and I'm going to go ahead and say this guy equals, I'm going to use square brackets, and I'm going to go ahead and put my 2 waypoints in here. So I just go ahead and say waypoint 1 and WP2, and now my 2 waypoints are living inside this array. Okay, that's fine. At this point, I still have my enemy speed. I've got my array of waypoints. I've got 2 waypoints in here. And so I need one other guy. And if you know anything about arrays, you know that arrays have an index for each individual element of the array. And this is true, I think, for every computer programming language I've worked with. I'm new to ActionScript, but I've worked with other languages. I've got to be able to access the index, and so to create that, I'm going to go ahead and create another variable. I'm going to call him, let's call him WP index. So that's for waypoint index. And when I refer to this guy, let's go ahead and make him an int. When I refer to this guy, he is going to point to whichever element. In this case, I only have 2 elements in my array. I think I'll go ahead and start him at 0. Remember, the first element of an array is always 0. At least that's true for ActionScript in Java and C++ and Pascal and Visual Basic and other languages that I've worked with. So let's go ahead and say index, WP index is at 0. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head down, and I want to, instead of just saying 200, 300, I'm going to go ahead and put in the value of my waypoint. Now, the first waypoint has value 500, 350, so I'm going to go ahead and indicate that. So I've got waypoints is the name of my array. Which one do I want to go to? Now, I could just put a 0 in here. 0. Oops, that's the letter O. If I put a 0 in here, that should give me the value of the first point, the first waypoint. The first waypoint, remember, since I loaded this guy in the first element of the array, and this guy has the value 500, 350, my ships should all be moving to the dx and dy value of, or towards this guy, which is the point 500, 300. Let's go ahead and run this and see if we've done everything correctly. No, I did not. Let's go ahead and see what's going on. Did I get an output error, compile error? Let's go back and see what's going on. I got my ships here, and they're not showing up. Interesting. I'm going to go ahead and pause this and take. Okay, I just made kind of a silly error. I put in my waypoint. I put in the location 0 here, but what I forgot to do is put the x coordinate in. So this is an element inside of the array. The element happens to be a point object, and this object, I did not use the property x here. Actually, let's see what if I run this program without this, what happens is this. If I go ahead and run this at this point, notice that my ship is actually up here off the screen, so I couldn't see it. But as I come in here, if I go ahead and say change the x value here, and I'm going to change the y value here, this is now going to work. Okay, so here I go. Now my ship is moving in the right direction, but what I want to do is I want to go ahead and do a couple little things here. I'm going to go ahead and instead of just putting a 0 in, I want to go ahead and use my variable WP index, and what that's going to do is when WP index equals 0, there's not going to be any change whatsoever. It's going to run exactly the same because WP index equals 0. But what I want to do is I want to add some more functionality here. I want to go ahead and say that when my ship gets within a few pixels of the waypoint, what I want to do is I want to change direction. And so I'll go ahead and increment this to the next waypoint. And so, okay, let's go ahead and do a couple of things here. The first thing I want to do is check the distance to the waypoint. So to do that, I'm going to create another variable, and I'm going to go ahead and call this distance to waypoint. And let's go ahead and set that, make that a number. And I'm going to go ahead and set that equal to, gosh, maybe I shouldn't set it equal to anything right now. Set it equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and that's my distance to waypoint. That's kind of a long name. Let's go ahead and make that dist to waypoint. Okay, now if I take that guy, what I need to do is figure out how far the distance is. And so to do that, I'm just going to remember a little bit of geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and say the distance to the waypoint is equal to, and if I remember, I've got the distance between any two points in a plane is going to be the difference of the x coordinates squared plus the difference of the y coordinates squared, and we take the square root of that whole thing. That's just some simple geometry from Pythagoras, and so I'm going to go ahead and use my math class again. In this case, I'm going to use a new function called sqrt for square root, and I've already got dx and dy, so let's see if I can use those. I'm going to go ahead and take dx squared and add that to dy squared. Right now I'm just putting in parentheses. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in dx and dy squared, and then I need to take the square root of that whole thing. The problem is, well, let's put that in. I'm going to put in dx times dx, and over here I'm going to put in dy times dy. Now there's probably a square function inside a flash somewhere, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it this way because it seems pretty simple. And that should give me the distance between my ship and a point. And so what I want to do is I want to say that if that distance and is less than some value, I'm going to go ahead and increment my waypoint index. So I'm going to say WP index plus plus. Okay, so the problem with this is I'm going to potentially go beyond the length of my array. So what I can do here is, first I'm going to do two checks actually. I'm going to go ahead and check. The first thing is I'm going to say if the distance to the waypoint, which is this guy, if it gets less than 1, okay, if it's less than 1, I want to go ahead and increment my index to the next one. The other thing though is if it is already at the end of the array, I don't want to do that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if the index, which is this guy, is, as long as he is less than the, let's see, waypoints, the length of waypoints. So the way I check this, I say waypoints dot length. So length is a property of any array. And I better make that -1. And let's see what happens now. What I should have happen is the guy should go to the first waypoint, and when he reaches, or when he gets within 1 pixel of that waypoint, he switches and he goes to the next one. Now the nice thing about this coding at this point is that notice I've got 2 waypoints. Okay. Well, it turns out if I wanted to, I could make 4 waypoints, and it would essentially work the same way. So I just come in here. Let's go ahead and make this guy 300 and this guy 200. So he's going to be moving from the right side of the stage to the left. And let's just go ahead and make him bouncing up and down. And inside here, I just want to go ahead and add these guys. So I have WP3 and WP4. Okay, let's go ahead and save that guy. And what should happen now is he should be moving nicely. He's not. And so let's see what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and hit end